What's going on, guys? Rye Flawless here, and today I want to talk about how the Nintendo Switch Lite could negatively affect competitive Pokemon, and VGC competitive Pokemon in particular. So, we're going to be talking about tournaments, and how streaming and gameplay will be affected by the introduction of the Nintendo Switch Lite. So, just the Switch alone, I feel, had negative effects on the competitive play, because even though it has a touchscreen, in order to stream it, you would assume that they'd have to put a capture card onto a docked Switch, and that would make it so that you'd have to use a controller. And I think the touchscreen was the optimal way to make competitive choices in the format since it was introduced. And I did kind of concede to the fact that if both players had to use a docked console and was using a controller, it would be fair competitively, and maybe we just have to adjust times for making your choices, things like that. Minimal changes to help make the matches run a little bit more smoothly. However, with the introduction of the Nintendo Switch Lite that cannot be docked, we have a bit of an issue. Because since it's not a cartridge-based console in the same way the DS is, yes, it does use cartridges, but they're not writable cartridges. They're the same as discs. So there's no data that will be written onto there. So you can't just put your cartridge into their in-house console like in the past with the DS and 3DS and just have theirs have the capture card. It's not going to work that way. Somehow the data will need to be accessible, and so you'll need one Switch that is hooked up to a capture card, and you can't really force people to bring a regular Switch when there is the option of a Switch Lite. You can't say, oh, you can't play in this tournament because you have a Switch Lite and not a regular Switch that can go into our dock. So that is a bit of an issue that I see with the Lite. How are they going to make it so it's fair for all players to bring their Nintendo Switch with their data for their game? So it is kind of sketchy, and I still do agree that a touchscreen is probably the best way to play in that competitive format, especially because the people using the Lite will always have access to that touchscreen, and you can't force players to play multiple different ways. The touchscreen will always give you more efficiency in this type of a game, so it has to be fair. So what ways can they implement a fair way for everyone to bring their Pokemon and play competitively and have it streamed? Maybe Global Link, but we really haven't seen details of how that's going to be implemented on the Switch. So there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and I really don't know how Game Freak and the Pokemon Company are going to address these issues. I for one am really excited to see VGC on the Nintendo Switch and see tournaments streamed, but how they're going to do it, I currently have no idea. I have certain things that I've kind of knocked around in my head. You could have a capture card put into a Switch Lite like we have with the 3DS, and someone can use that one and maybe transfer their game data onto that Switch Lite, so everyone's using a touchscreen, and maybe that'll work. But I don't know how I would feel having to transfer my personal game data over to an in-house console and then have to transfer it back. What happens if you forget it and lose all of your game data? That's something that, as a player, I would never want to risk. So that seemed a little bit sketchy. Like I said before, Global Link could be a thing. You could have rental teams put up there, and then you could just use the rental teams, and anyone could use an in-house capture card attached Switch or Switch Lite and be able to use their team using Global Link. And perhaps that's the way that they'll do it. But we haven't seen how that worked, and also having to upload a rental team just for the tournament kind of seems like an inconvenience as well. It doesn't seem to be very player friendly at the moment how they're going to set this up. And so I do think this is a hard spot for the Pokemon Company to be in, and Game Freak. I mean, Game Freak really only has to figure out what the competitive format's gonna be. Other than that, the Pokemon Company has to figure it out with the hardware that Nintendo supplied. And it's hard for me to see right now how Nintendo has thought this through. I almost feel like they kind of forced the hardware onto Game Freak for development, and we're here trying to adjust. The early dates for the regional tournaments have already been announced, and the format is going to start prior to the Sword and Shield release. So it's going to start on Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon on the 3DS. So we won't really see how this is going to change, or what needs to change, or what effects this will have going forward until probably halfway through the 2020 season. There are no international championships announced at this time, because I imagine they're going to want to change the format to Sword and Shield by the international time. But right now we have a very uncertain future for VGC streaming, as well as the format of the game. So guys, if you have any concerns, or you have any enlightened ideas on how they're going to make this work, I would absolutely love to hear it. And if you liked what you saw, as always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. You're all flawless. Bye.
Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis.